On the evening of Saturday, November 18th, 2024, on a quiet road in the suburbs of Jacksonville, Florida, the tranquility of the neighborhood was suddenly shattered by the blaring sirens of a police car. A woman driving a bright red car sped down the street, swerving and weaving as if trying to win first place in a contest for best collision avoidance. Other vehicles on the road had to swerve urgently to avoid her, prompting the police to immediately turn on their lights and signal for her to pull over. But instead of complying, she began a series of actions that left everyone speechless. And that was just the beginning of an evening full of drama, sarcasm, and no shortage of humor. On a peaceful evening, the streetlights cast a soft glow on the cars that glided by slowly, the stillness of the night resembling a painting depicting the tranquility of the city. Suddenly, the roar of an engine shattered the calm atmosphere, and all eyes turned to the bright red car swerving wildly on the road, as if participating in a bizarre competition called Who Can Turn the Most Dramatically. Her driving maneuvers were not those of someone in a panic, but rather a kind of artful driving, blending arrogance with a disregard for everything around her. The car not only exceeded the speed limit, but also repeatedly forced other vehicles onto the shoulder, creating a wave of chaos, as if the street belonged to her alone. The police received an urgent alert, and immediately, the red car became the target of a tense chase. When the car was finally ordered to pull over, everything seemed to be heading toward a smooth resolution, but in reality, it opened up a bizarre new chapter in this story. The woman behind the wheel, in her 30s, was wearing a stylish leather jacket, fashionable yet wrinkled, as if it belonged to someone who had endured a long, tiring day. She was neither in a hurry nor showing any signs of worry. Instead, she slowly lowered the window, her gaze gliding over the officer with a defiant look. Her face exuded an air of, "I'm just an innocent person," but at the same time, there was a hint of smugness, as if she felt there was nothing to fear. As soon as the window came down, a strong gust of wind blew out, carrying with it the unmistakable smell of alcohol, making the officer frown, hold his breath, and struggle to suppress his reaction. She, with bleary yet sharp eyes, not only had an air of arrogance, but also seemed utterly indifferent to the situation she was in. In a nonchalant tone, she gave a brief response, brimming with confidence. "What's the problem?" The scent of alcohol on her breath felt like a challenge no one could ignore. There was no sign of worry or regret in the way she faced the officer, only the impression of someone performing a little act, fully aware that she could handle the situation easily, or at least trying to create the illusion that she could. But this smugness was, in fact, the clearest sign of someone who had no idea how far she was pushing things, and who couldn't predict that the peaceful atmosphere of that evening would soon be replaced by an unrelenting storm of action. "Hello? Is there a problem?" she asked, her voice elongated, with a mix of slight embarrassment and smugness. Her smile, though somewhat innocent, carried a mischievous glint, as if she had nothing to fear. However, when the officer asked her to produce her documents and step out of the vehicle, her expression quickly shifted, from calm to one of slight displeasure. She took a deep breath, as if preparing for a difficult negotiation, then, without saying a word, abruptly floored the accelerator. The car shot forward, leaving the officer standing frozen, like a statue, with the red lights growing smaller in the distance. The car sped away like an arrow, leaving the officer with no choice but to urgently chase after her, honking in desperation. The chase unfolded with the shrill sound of sirens and the flashing lights of the police car, as if straight out of an action movie, only missing the dynamic soundtrack. But what baffled the officers was her driving style. It seemed she wasn't really trying to escape, but was rather putting on a performance for herself, a drunk driver wanting to show off her superior cornering skills. She weaved through traffic in a perplexing manner, not with the frantic urgency of someone fleeing, but with a slow, deliberate drive, as if savoring every moment of the game she was playing. The chase finally ended, not with the dramatic climax one might expect, but rather at a desolate gas station at a street corner. The flickering neon lights seemed to be attempting to create an eerie atmosphere, as if the station itself wanted to serve as the backdrop for a horror movie. The red car was abandoned in the middle of the lot, the door wide open, the engine still humming like a wild animal just set free. The woman, in a tactical escape maneuver, left the car and dashed into the gas station's restroom, locking herself inside as if it were an impenetrable fortress. Inside, she wasn't just hiding. Perhaps the alcohol had dulled her sense of reality, and she seemed to believe that flimsy door could protect her from the whole police team waiting outside. She stood behind the door, occasionally shivering as if taking some pleasure in having evaded the tense pursuit. The officer, after several minutes of patient knocking, tried to keep his tone professional, but his patience had worn thin. "Ma'am, we're not filming a reality show here. Please come out immediately." His voice rang through the loudspeaker, yet there was no urgency or worry in it, only the fatigue of someone too familiar with these kinds of bizarre situations. But she, despite being chased, despite knowing every eye was on her, still stood behind the door, smug as ever, as if this moment was the true highlight of her journey. A few seconds of silence passed before the door swung open and she stepped out, her demeanor completely at odds with the situation. Despite her messy hair and smeared makeup, the woman radiated a strange kind of confidence, as if she had just won an Oscar. Calmly, she asked, "What's all the fuss about?" However, her calm vanished the moment her eyes landed on the handcuffs glinting in the flashlight of the nearest officer. Without a word, she abruptly turned around and dashed back into the restroom at a speed that left the entire team stunned. They had to spend a few more minutes rescuing her from herself. Finally, when she was escorted out, she refused to cooperate, opting for a resistance style that was half walking, half being dragged. Constant grumbling could be heard, mixed with comments like, "Is this how you guys treat women? I just wanted to wash my hands, what's wrong with that?" Her combination of defiant attitude and thoughtless actions made her the center of attention, causing the entire police team to feel both exasperated and unable to suppress a laugh. One officer even whispered to a colleague, "If this is what professional escape looks like, then we must be arresting a first-year student." When asked why she was running, the woman, with eyes glossed over from alcohol and her head held high as if giving a press conference, boldly responded with a reverse question. "Do you know who I am?" An awkward silence settled over the team, as if they were all trying to dig through their memories to figure out if they had missed any famous names from TV. But the silence was quickly shattered by the sharp click of the handcuffs being tightened around her wrist. If that was the answer to her question, it certainly didn't seem to satisfy her. Throughout the process of her arrest, she showcased an impressive level of creativity, using a vocabulary that could only have been invented by seasoned, drunk poets. Impromptu insults, completely ignoring grammar rules, shot out one after another, leaving even the officers, who were used to all kinds of language during their duties, stunned. One of the officers even whispered to a colleague, "She must have a master's degree in folk literature." Not stopping at words, she also expressed her resistance through action. After stomping hard on the foot of the nearest officer, causing him to jump, she suddenly spun around and lunged at another officer with the intent to bite affectionately. Though the action missed entirely and only swiped the air, it forced the whole team to be extra cautious, as if they were dealing with an aggressive mole in a whack-a-mole game. When asked to take a breathalyzer test, she once again surprised everyone with her bold response. "I'm not drunk, I'm just having fun." She said this with a proud expression, as if she were representing a new movement. Drink to have fun, not to get drunk. One officer gave a forced smile, shook his head and thought to himself, "Her idea of fun will definitely be noted in tomorrow's report." Her chaotic yet confident actions turned the entire event into a dark comedy, while also serving as a living testament to the saying, drunkenness often goes hand in hand with uncontrollable behavior, and occasionally, with a vivid imagination. After an uneven war of words, where every attempt at persuasion by the police was met with sharp and combative responses, they finally realized something important. Her blood pressure was skyrocketing. However, it wasn't because they suddenly became concerned for her health, but because they feared that if the situation wasn't handled properly, she would have grounds to sue them for negligence in duty, a reason she would no doubt present in a lawsuit with persuasive rhetoric, accompanied by a long list of rights she believed she was entitled to. On the way to the hospital, the atmosphere in the car grew oppressive, as no one on the police team could predict what she would say next. And true to form, she began rambling about her high-level connections. "I have very high-level connections. You guys have no idea," she confidently declared, tilting her head as if negotiating with a CEO of a major corporation. The whole police team couldn't help but share a skeptical glance. One officer, with a thoughtful expression, asked grimly, "So who is this high-level connection?" She, as if interrupted from an important train of thought, paused, furrowing her brow as if trying to define a power relationship even she wasn't sure of. Well, I don't really remember, but don't worry, they're high level. I can vouch for you guys." Her voice was full of arrogance, but to the officers it was clear she was fumbling, an awkwardness that was impossible to hide, as this woman wasn't just battling the legal system, but also the mundane realities of life. Though the officers were just eager for the ordeal to end as quickly as possible, they couldn't help but be astounded by the way she accidentally made every situation humorously bizarre. She might have thought she was in some important meeting where everyone had to listen and show respect, but in reality, she was sitting in a police car, handcuffed tightly, heading to the hospital, and no high-level connections could save her from the charges waiting for her. In the end, after a series of troublesome events and uncomfortable laughter, the woman faced a range of serious charges: drunk driving, resisting arrest, and assaulting a police officer. Things seemed to be getting worse, but what made the officers sigh was her arrogant confidence, even when arrested and confronted with multiple accusations. When asked if she wanted a lawyer, she simply shrugged smugly and replied with a firm statement, "I'll represent myself. Who can understand me better than me?" Her words sent a chill through the law enforcement officers and sparked an intriguing sense of doubt about her self-defense skills. She might not remember certain crucial details in the heat of the moment, but with unwavering determination, she was convinced she would be the only one capable of defending herself in court. Perhaps this story would become a lifelong lesson about the unpredictable consequences of drunk driving and a dismissive attitude toward the law. Or at least, it would be an amusing tale for her to tell her friends during the next drinking session, as they sat around and laughed together. But no one could be sure that after that, they would still want to hear her tell it. After all, she had drawn attention not just with her bizarre actions, but also by making everyone wonder if things could get even worse if she continued to lose herself in these battles. In the end, the story of this woman is not just a series of chaotic situations, but also a valuable lesson about the dangers of losing control over one's behavior and the attitude of disregarding the law. While her actions may be amusing and cause others to shake their heads, they also serve as a warning about the serious consequences that impatience and arrogance can bring. Ultimately, the lesson to be learned is this: in life, confidence and determination are necessary, but they must be built on a foundation of responsibility and respect for the common rules of society. Only then can we avoid unnecessary battles and live a truly stable and meaningful life. The takeaway from this story is that confidence is important, but it must go hand in hand with respect for the regulations and responsibilities of each individual in society. Only by understanding and adhering to these limits can we live peacefully and avoid unnecessary troubles.